This video covers all the latest chapters starting from chapter 90 onward. If you haven't watched the earlier chapters yet, be sure to check the link in the description or tap the I button above to catch up. Let's start today's recap. The scene shifted to Sichuan province, at the Tang clan. The Qing sect's elder, known as the Tempest Swordsman, arrived alongside Nun Myoljiol, the Ma sect's first disciple, and their respective disciples. As they entered, they saw members of the Shaolin Temple and the Heavenly Merchant Guild already present. The Qing sect elder shouted angrily, declaring that by law, all matters occurring in Sichuan must be resolved within Sichuan itself. He questioned what business the Shaolin Temple and the Heavenly Merchant Guild from Hunan province had there, accusing them of ignoring Sichuan's laws. Ryuseowa, the daughter of the Heavenly Merchant Guild's leader and the overall representative of the guild's body treatment clinic, stepped forward. Clasping her hands respectfully, she apologized and explained that the Heavenly Merchant Guild had come only to provide medical treatment, having heard that many people in the region were suffering from bone and joint ailments. The Qing sect elder shouted again, accusing her of openly declaring an intention to interfere in Sichuan's affairs. At that moment, Haiyan, the leader of the Shaolin External Hall who had come to capture Mujin and his companions, stepped forward. He calmly replied that Shaolin had no intention of interfering in Sichuan's affairs, but neither could they stand by and allow an unnecessary fight to break out. Hearing this, the Qing sect elder, the Ma sect's first disciple, and their followers grew tense. They turned to leave, and the Qing sect elder shouted that for the sake of Shaolin's reputation, they would overlook the matter this time, but warned that it would not be so simple next time. Haiyan responded evenly, saying that if fate allowed, they would meet again. Silently observing everything, Patriarch Tang Peijin thought to himself that Shaolin's reputation was truly well-earned. With aura alone, they had driven back both the Qing sect and the Ma sect. After letting out a sigh, Haiyan turned to Patriarch Tang and said that now the urgent matter was settled, he wished to see Mujin and the remaining children. Tang Peijin became visibly nervous at those words. Meanwhile, a person approached Ryuseowa with a letter and whispered that warrior Kang Hyuk had asked him to deliver it to her. Kang Hyuk was a false name Mujin was using. She accepted the letter. At the same time, Tang Peijin informed Haiyan that Mujin and his companions were no longer there and had already fled. Ryuseowa opened the letter and began to read. Inside, it said that he hoped she had been well. He wrote that he had been traveling with his companions, settling many matters along the way, and thus had not found time to visit. However, he believed the traces of his journey would prove helpful to both Shaolin and the Heavenly Merchant Guild. When the day came that they met again, he promised to send word in advance, and until then, he wished for her safety. The letter was signed by Mujin. The scene then shifted to a distant forest. Mujin stopped the carriage so they could rest, and the group began eating calorie bars made by Mujin with Tangak's help. Mujin remarked that since they had come this far, their senior brothers would not be able to pursue them immediately. The horses were tired as well, so resting for a while was necessary. Mugung asked where exactly they were. Mu Kyung commented that since Mujin had been leading the horses, he should know. Meanwhile, Muyul and Chung Su were unloading items from the carriage. Mujin unfolded the map and admitted that he had not had a chance to look at it earlier because everyone had urged him to hurry. After examining it, he pointed to Guangxi province and told them that was where they were. The others reacted in shock, saying they had never even heard of such a place. Mujin explained that of course they had not, since Guangxi was an unorthodox sect region. Hearing this, they panicked, shouting that they had entered unorthodox territory. Mujin reminded them that they were the ones who had told him to hurry anywhere at all. They replied that they had been afraid the elders would chase them down, and that if they were caught, Shaolin would show no mercy. Mujin silently apologized in his heart. The truth was that he had brought them to Guangxi on purpose. There was someone there they needed to recruit as an ally, and they also had to crush the members of the New Heavens faction along the way. It could not be helped. Aloud, Mujin reassured them that even if it was unorthodox territory, nothing too terrible would happen in broad daylight. Eventually, they calmed themselves, reasoning that Guangxi was still a place where people lived, and running into green forest bandits did not happen that often. Almost immediately after, they heard footsteps approaching. Turning toward the sound, they saw a group of 5 bandits, led by a bald man. One of the bandits sneered, asking why monks who should be in a temple were wandering through their territory. The leader laughed and suggested that perhaps Buddha had sent them as a gift. Mujin and his companions noted internally how quickly the bandits had appeared after being mentioned. The bandit leader announced himself as Crazed Bear Meng Rang, the nightmare and terror of Guangxi province. He mocked them and leapt into the air, swinging his club down toward them. A short time later, Meng Rang was sitting on the ground with a battered face, trembling as he begged forgiveness. He admitted his foolishness and acknowledged their strength. Mu Jin replied flatly that Meng Rang was simply weak. Mu Kyung commented that this must be the level of Green Forest bandits who had never properly learned martial arts. Magong asked what they should do with them. Meng Rang weakly muttered that Buddha taught mercy to all living beings, only to be immediately silenced by Magong. Mu Jin, however, was already thinking ahead. To keep the New Heavens faction in check within Guangxi, their small group alone would not be enough. He approached Meng Rang and asked where the largest Green Forest stronghold in the region was. Some time later, the scene shifted to the largest Green Forest stronghold in Guangxi, Great Tiger Stronghold. A group dressed as bandits arrived at its gates. The guards shouted at them to identify themselves and warned them to leave if they valued their lives. It was revealed that the newcomers were Mu Jin and his companions. Standing at the front, Magong shouted that they were the Black Bear sect and had come to take over Great Tiger Stronghold that very day. Earlier, Mu Jin had proposed disguising themselves as bandits. Mu Kyung had been shocked, asking if they were really pretending to be Green Forest bandits. Mu Jin had explained that it was like hiding a leaf within the forest. By pretending to be a Green Forest group, they could avoid pointless conflict, overthrow other bandit groups, and protect the people of Guangxi. Mu Kyung had reluctantly accepted the logic. Magong, however, had initially refused, declaring that as a proud member of the Great Shaolin Temple, he would not pretend to be Green Forest. Mu Jin had simply told him that if he did it, he could be the leader. At that, Magong had immediately agreed, blushing as he accepted the role. Now, at Great Tiger Stronghold, Magong shouted that he was the Black Bear sect's leader, the Bear Fist Destroyer, and demanded that the leader of Great Tiger Stronghold come out and face him. A guard scoffed at the insolence, but before he could act, a huge man emerged from within the stronghold. Placing a hand on the guard's head, the man told him to step aside. The guard immediately obeyed. The towering leader approached Magong, his physique far larger and more imposing. Magong could not help but think about how enormous the man was. The leader sneered, saying he had never heard of any Black Bear sect. He mocked the idea of leaders fighting over ownership like orthodox sects, declaring that Green Forest only took what it wanted, and now, it would take their lives. With that, the bandits surrounded Mu Jin's group. Some time later, the leader was sitting on the ground, his face swollen and defeated. He begged forgiveness, admitting that he had failed to recognize their greatness. Mu Jin repeated calmly that the man was simply weak. Then he turned to Magong and told him that now they were properly dressed and prepared, it was time for the chief to say a few words. Magong cleared his throat and declared that starting that day, Great Tiger Stronghold would fall under the banner of the Black Bear sect. He announced himself as their new leader, the Bear Fist Destroyer. Watching him, Mu Jin thought that Magong seemed to be genuinely enjoying himself. With that, he knew the mission to crush the New Heavens faction had truly begun. Some time later, Mu Jin explained the truth to his companions. New Heavens was the root of nearly every tragedy within the Geijiang universe. Contrary to what one might expect, their first targets had not been the great Murim clans or the major sects, but the merchant guilds of Murim. Their operations had proceeded in absolute secrecy, and before anyone realized what was happening, Murim's most prominent merchant guilds had fallen completely into New Heaven's grasp. Using those guilds, New Heavens moved enormous sums of money and vast quantities of military supplies. To transport these resources covertly, they had established a disguised organization, the North Wind Escort Establishment. While eating a bar beside him, Magong remarked that this meant the North Wind Escort Establishment was the group they were waiting for. Mu Jin confirmed it. He reminded Magong of the group they had encountered back at the Tai sect, the ones who possessed the Divine Thief Tomb's map. During his time at the Tang clan, Mu Jin had heard many things, one of which was that the North Wind Escort Establishment was closely tied to New Heavens. After chewing for a moment, Magong asked when they would arrive. Mu Jin replied that he had no way of knowing. It was boring to wait, but they were allowing all other travelers to pass normally. Seeing the relief on people's faces made it worthwhile. Inwardly, Magong noted that the Green Forest bandits had not looked pleased at all. Just then, the former leader of Great Tiger Stronghold arrived and reported that a signal had come from the scouts at the forest trail's entrance. The North Wind Escort Establishment mentioned by Mu Jin was approaching. Hearing this, Mu Jin smiled, turned to Magong, and said that they were here. Magong smiled back. Before long, The North Wind Escort Establishment's caravan arrived at the Great Tiger Stronghold's toll point. Mujin, Mugum, and the bandits of Great Tiger Stronghold moved to stop the carriages. An elderly man from the escort stepped forward, clasped his hands respectfully, and greeted them. He introduced himself as Jang Won-sam, the chief escort leader of the North Wind Escort Establishment, and said he looked forward to working with him. Mujin and the others remained silent, staring coldly at Jang Won-sam. Jang Won-sam produced a pouch filled with coins and explained that it was the toll payment, adding that they had included a bit more than the standard rate. Mujin replied that it was not enough. The toll fee had increased, and they would need to pay 10 times that amount. Jang Won-sam was taken aback and protested that such a sum was impossible for a small escort establishment like theirs. Mujin stepped closer and calmly said that if that was the case, there was no helping it. He leaned in and whispered that Jang Won-sam should offer a tribute instead of a toll, remarking that one of the wagons reeked of something very valuable. Jang Won-sam laughed and remarked that they were no ordinary green forest rabble. Suddenly, he flung the coin pouch toward Mujin to obstruct his vision and followed up with a surprise sword attack. Mujin barely avoided it by bending backward. Shocked, Jang Won-sam asked how Mujin had dodged the strike. Mugum called out anxiously, asking whether Mujin was all right. Before Mugum could do anything else, he heard shouting behind him. Turning around, he saw the bandits of Great Tiger Stronghold being attacked by members of the North Wind Escort Establishment. The bandits cried out in confusion, asking why the escorts were attacking them out of nowhere, and how they could be so impossibly strong. Gritting his teeth, Mugum muttered that he had not even seen them move. When had they gotten behind them? Meanwhile, facing Jang Won-sam, Mujin glanced back at the escort fighters. He realized they had used phantom steps and dark shadow arts. These men had already become new heavens hunting dogs. Mugum rushed toward his subordinates, apologizing to Mujin and saying he would leave Jang Won-sam to him. Shouting at the escorts, Mugum demanded to know what they were doing to his brothers. He immediately ordered the bandits of Great Tiger Stronghold to gather around him. They obeyed at once. When one escort tried to strike a bandit, Mugum intercepted the blow, kicking the attacker away. He declared loudly that anyone who touched his subordinates would answer to him, Bare Fist Destroyer, chief of Great Tiger Stronghold. Watching this, Mujin thought that Mugum was far too immersed in his role. Jang Won-sam then shouted at Mujin, demanding to know who they really were. Judging by their aura and stances, he accused them of being Shaolin monks, though their grown hair made it difficult to tell. Mujin calmly replied that his identity hardly mattered at the moment. Instead, he asked what about Jang Won-sam himself, a new heavens bastard. Jang Won-sam fell silent, confused, and asked what Mujin meant. Smiling, Mujin asked if he wanted him to repeat it. Angered by the insult, Jang Won-sam charged forward, shouting that he would tear Mujin limb from limb until he confessed how he knew that name. He swung his ore-infused sword repeatedly, but Mujin avoided every strike with precise footwork. Leaping into the air, Jang Won-sam unleashed a powerful vertical strike using his sword energy, Azure Heavens. Mujin smiled, hardened his skin with the Iron Guard technique, and blocked the attack head-on. Jang Won-sam's sword shattered on impact. Stunned, Jang Won-sam demanded to know how Mujin's body could be so durable. Mujin did not answer. He gathered aura into his right fist and struck Jang Won-sam directly in the face. Blood sprayed as Jang Won-sam collapsed to the ground, unconscious. Mujin let out a sigh, remarking that it was fortunate Jang Won-sam had not been that difficult to deal with. Mugum approached and asked anxiously if Mujin, no, the vice chief, was all right, and whether the man was dead. Mujin replied that he had only knocked him unconscious. Smiling, he ordered everyone to see what the escorts had been hiding, to load the wounded into the wagon, and to return to Great Tiger Stronghold. As they moved out, Mugum reflected that the leader of the North Wind Escort Establishment had been strong, and even the escorts themselves were far from ordinary. He wondered just how far Mujin's monstrous abilities had grown. Mujin gave the order to head back. That night, at Great Tiger Stronghold, now renamed the Black Bear Sect, Mujin's group gathered after completing their assigned tasks. Mu Kyung reported that the tribute had consisted only of clothes, which they had burned as Mujin instructed. However, something unexpected had been hidden inside. Mugum remarked that hiding it within clothes made sense, as it was the safest place. Chung Su added that he could feel an ominous energy leaking from the item. Mujin realized that his suspicions had been correct. They had been hiding something, but he had never expected to actually see it, dragon scale armor. He could not confirm whether it truly came from a dragon, but it was the symbolic possession of the Wolf King, one of New Heaven's 7 captains, and the strongest divine-grade armor in existence. He had thought the North Wind escort establishment was transporting something from the underworld faction, never something like this. If used properly, it could deal a massive blow to New Heavens. Breaking the silence, Mugung asked what they should do next. Were they going to stay and fight the North Wind escort establishment? Mujin replied that had been the original plan. However, with this unexpected discovery, they needed to change course. They would leave the mountain immediately and head for the Minor Azure sect. Late at night, at the Guangxi Black Bear sect, Chung Su stood watch atop a nearby hill, perfectly still as his eyes scanned the surroundings. Ever since that day, the headaches had never truly stopped. He couldn't tell whether it was simple exhaustion from the long journey, or the lingering pain of having lost someone precious. Either way, the ache left his heart heavy and his mood steeped in quiet sorrow. Suddenly his senses flared. Hostile auras, more than one, were approaching from a distance, not far at all. His expression tightened. The feeling was familiar. He knew immediately that he had to warn the others. Meanwhile, a group rushed through the darkness toward the Black Bear sect's territory. They were members of the North Wind escort establishment, led by its owner, Dan Chianak. Anxiety churned in his chest as he moved. Something was terribly wrong. No signal had arrived confirming the escort goods had reached their destination. Of all times for things to go wrong, it had to be now, while the dragon scale armor was being transported. No matter the cost, he had to recover it. Then, Dan Chianak noticed 2 figures standing calmly in the middle of the path ahead. He raised a hand, halting his men. "Who are you two?" As they stepped into the light, their identities became clear: Mujin and Mugung. Mujin casually tapped Mugung on the shoulder. "See? I told you these bastards would show up." Earlier that day, Mujin had warned him that the North Wind escorts would come back. Mugung had been skeptical. "You really think they'd dare attack again, in broad daylight?" "Of course," Mujin had replied. "For something this important, someone would be keeping watch. They must have realized the dragon scale armor went missing, even if they don't know who took it. If they fail to retrieve it, their heads will roll." Mugung had frowned. "Is it really that important?" Mujin had nodded grimly. "Its owner isn't some ordinary madman. They'll send someone at least on the level of a commanding head escort." After a moment of thought, Mugung had asked quietly, "If that happens, can I fight their leader?" Mujin had looked surprised. "I don't mind, but why?" "I felt something," Mugung had said, recalling Mujin's earlier battle with Zhang Wansam. Now, in the present, Dan Chianak roared and charged forward. "You fucking idiots! How dare you touch his property? You have no idea who you're dealing with. You're running straight toward your own deaths." Mugung stepped forward to meet him. Dan Chianak's sword slashed through the air with terrifying speed. Mugung ducked beneath the strike, his heart pounding. Even without revealing his true identity, he could tell, this man was faster than expected. "I can't use the Rulai Divine Palm outright," Mugung thought. "But I can borrow its essence, channel that explosive force into my fist. All I need is one opening." Dan Chianak struck again, the blade aimed straight for Mugung's neck. "Now!" Mugung slipped beneath the swing and surged forward, closing the distance in an instant. His fist, packed with compressed force, slammed into Dan Chianak's abdomen. The impact echoed like thunder. Dan Chianak coughed violently, blood spraying from his mouth as he collapsed to his knees, then fell face first into the dirt, unconscious. Mugung exhaled deeply, relief washing over him. A slow clap sounded behind him. He turned to see Mujin, who had already defeated every escort Dan Chianak had brought along. "That was impressive," Mujin said with a grin. "You applied the Rulai Divine Palm into a fist technique, exploding fist strike, right?" Mugung chuckled proudly. "Of course. I am the Bear Fist Destroyer." Mujin laughed. "How long are you planning to keep that title?" As he laughed, Mujin studied him with quiet pride. To transform the Rulai Divine Palm into a fist technique on the spot, Mugung's adaptability was remarkable. In a single exchange, he had created a new martial skill. He truly had grown. At that moment, a voice called out from the darkness. "Are you two all right?" They turned to see Chung Su approaching, concern etched across his face. "Taoist Chung Su?" Mujin asked. "What brings you here so late?" "That's my question," Chung Su replied. "I sensed hostile auras and rushed over. When I felt yours nearby, I feared something had happened." Mujin gestured toward Dan Chianak's unconscious body. Well, this is awkward. These are the people we were waiting for. Chung Su's eyes widened. That attire, North Wind Escort Establishment? That's right, Mujin said calmly. Our business here is finished. Once the sun rises, we'll abandon the carriage and leave. Mugung hesitated. What about the treasure inside? We won't use it, Mujin replied. It'll only slow us down. From here on, speed matters more. He paused, then added softly, we come into this world empty-handed, and we leave empty-handed. In his heart, Mujin knew the truth. The treasure would scatter with the former Great Tiger Stronghold bandits, traded across cities and regions. That chaos would buy them time stolen from New Heaven's pursuit. Elsewhere, at Yahello Wolf Fang's stronghold, a trembling subordinate knelt before the Wolf King, one of New Heaven's 7 captains, a future legend of the Geijiang universe. The dragon scale armor has been stolen. The man reported, cold sweat dripping down his face. We're searching all of Guangxi province. The Wolf King chuckled softly. How troublesome. He murmured. A chess piece meant for my board has slipped away. The Cloud Fragrance Hall Master dies, and now the armor he gifted us is gone. Why am I surrounded only by incompetence? We'll retrieve it, the man vowed. Without fail. The Wolf King moved. In a single motion, his blade flashed, and the man's head rolled to the ground. He has spoken. The Wolf King muttered coldly. I suppose it's time I moved myself. Run while you can, little rats. I'll mince you all the same. They departed from the Black Bear sect and began marching toward the Asura sect. After some time, they reached the crest of a hill. From there, a vast city spread out before their eyes. Mu Kyung squinted at the view below. Have we arrived? Mujin nodded. Yeah. As he gazed at the city, his thoughts grew heavy. This was Guilin, in Guangxi province. From here on, everything would become complicated. One of their main reasons for coming to Guangxi had been to wipe out New Heaven's forces, and in that regard, they had largely succeeded. Now, only one objective remained, to bring back 2 people believed to be within the Minor Azure sect. The problem was that reaching the Minor Azure sect meant passing directly through Guilin. And Guilin was no ordinary city. It was the territory of Hyok Jingang, one of the 10 great martial masters of the world, and one of New Heaven's central strongholds. A city that would later become the largest slave market in the Central Plains. A truly wretched place. Some time later, the group walked through Guilin's streets. Mu Kyung looked around, puzzled. I thought a city ruled by unorthodox sects would feel different. But on the surface, it doesn't seem much different from anywhere else. Muyo glanced at him. What kind of place were you expecting? I figured it'd be chaos everywhere. Mu Kyung replied. Unorthodox types stirring up trouble nonstop. Muyul chuckled. That actually sounds fun. That's not what I meant. Mu Kyung sighed. Anyway, I guess wherever people live, it's all the same. As he spoke, a child suddenly slammed into him and fell to the ground. Mu Kyung and Muyul immediately turned back. Hey, are you hurt? Kid, are you okay? But the child only lay there, trembling in fear. Muyul frowned. Something felt off. In a shaking voice, the child whispered, Please save me. Mom. Dad. Muyul stiffened. Something about him doesn't seem right. At that moment, a man hurried over. Oh my, thank you, he said quickly. He's my son. I scolded him earlier and he ran off. Thanks to you youngsters, I didn't have to chase him down. He reached out to grab the child. Come on now. I'll stop scolding you. Let's go home. Before he could lift him, Mu Kyung stepped forward, his voice suddenly cold. Wait. Are you really his father? The man's expression hardened instantly. You should have just walked away. He snarled. You stupid bastards. At his signal, several thugs appeared, surrounding Mujin's group with clubs and blades. So you found the one who ran, one of them said. Then they noticed the others. Who are these punks? You idiots, let go of him and get out of Guilin. Stop sticking your noses into other people's business. Muyul smiled faintly. This is exactly the kind of city you were imagining, Mu Kyung. Mu Kyung sighed. Yeah. He tightened his grip on the man's arm, the one claiming to be the child's father. Well, if they're committing crimes this openly, it makes things easier. He glanced at Mujin. It's fine if we restrain them and ask a few questions, right? The man screamed. My arm! It's going to break! Mujin smiled calmly. If you were going to do it anyway, why ask? Do whatever you want. Not long after, the thugs lay scattered across the ground, groaning, their faces swollen and bruised. The leader trembled. I'm sorry, great heroes. I'll tell you everything. We're just a merchant group operating in Gilin. Mukyung snorted. And you expect me to believe that? Looks like you still have enough strength to lie. Mujin stepped in. It's not entirely false. You are merchants. It's just that what you sell is special. His eyes sharpened. You're slave traders. And you're affiliated with the Unorthodox Alliance. The man went pale and fell silent. Muya looked at the child, then back at Mujin. If they're slave traders, does that mean this kid is? Mu Kyung didn't wait for the answer. He smacked the man's bald head with his wooden staff, grabbed him by the collar, and snarled. Stop hiding things and talk. There are other kids too, aren't there? Where's your base? The scene shifted to an annex building of the Gilin Merchant Guild. Inside, a sword slick with blood was withdrawn from a corpse. The man holding it spoke coldly. Owner Hyo Mayan. What happened to the child? Hyo Mayan clasped his hands nervously. I apologize, honored guest. Seeing how late it is, something must have gone wrong. Shall I bring you another child instead? The man sheathed his sword slowly. Have you ever heard this saying? When you buy a new sword, what you cut first determines your fortune. Hyo Mayan hesitated. My knowledge is lacking. I wouldn't know. They say the greatest fortune comes from cutting down an entire family. The man continued calmly. That's why I paid a fortune, for the parents and the child together. What meaning is there in cutting some other child? Hyo Mayan bowed deeply. So that's what you intended? I failed to recognize your wishes. I will prepare another family immediately. You'd better, the man replied coldly. My patience is running. A loud crash echoed from outside, cutting him off. He frowned. What is that noise? Hyo Mayan stiffened. I apologize. Something must have happened outside. I'll check at once. He flung open the door. Hey! What's all this noise? We have an honored guest. Before he could finish, Chung-Soo burst forward, his sword flashing. Hyo Mayan drew his blade, but it shattered instantly, sent flying as he was hurled backward and slammed into the floor. The guest narrowed his eyes. What's going on? Hyo Mayan lay stunned. I didn't even see the strike, an incredible martial master. Chung-Soo stepped into the room. Mujin and the others had headed for the main building where the children were supposedly held. Chung-Soo had checked the annex just in case, and found only a handful of guards. Now 2 corpses lay nearby, blood pooling across the floor. If I'd known it would be like this, he thought grimly, I would have gone to the main building instead. Hyo Mayan struggled to his feet. Who are you? Do you even know where you are, pulling something like this? Chung-Soo barely heard him. The horrific scene triggered something deep inside him. A sudden headache pierced his skull, and fragmented memories surged forth. Dead bodies piled around him, his sword soaked in blood, himself as a child standing among the carnage. He clutched his head. What, is this memory? Seeing his strange behavior, both Hyo Mayan and the guest hesitated in confusion. Chung-Soo's thoughts spiraled. Voices echoed in his mind. In the memory, a child looked at him and said, To survive, you have to kill. Chung-Soo's eyes slowly turned red. His expression twisted into something cold, unfamiliar. To survive, he murmured, gripping his sword tighter. I have to kill. The scene shifted to a mountain, where the sword saint and Hyo of the Wudang sect sat across from Grand Master Hyun Guang of the Shaolin Temple. Hyo addressed him directly, demanding that the bald monk explain why Chung-Soo had been dragged into this matter. Hyun Guang calmly replied that he should not worry so much. The sword saint responded that he was not worried, only slightly concerned. The Grand Master asked what exactly he was concerned about. Hyo then explained that it dated back a long time. Chung-Soo's first meeting with them had not been ordinary. It occurred when Song Bek, a first-class disciple, had been traveling through Jianghu under orders to hunt down a band of mountain bandits. After hearing that a nearby village had been attacked, Song Bek rushed there as fast as he could. What he found upon arrival was a mountain of bandit corpses. Sitting atop that pile was a child who looked no older than 10. With a chipped sword slung over his shoulder, the child had been tearing into a crow's carcass and eating it. People had said the child looked like a beast. Moved by pity, Song Bek brought the child back to Wudang, where they raised him and gave him the name Chung-Soo. After hearing this, Hyun Guang remarked that it was hard to believe the pure and gentle Chung Su had such a past, and wondered if the Chung Su they knew now had become gentle thanks to Wudong's teachings. Hyo denied that explanation. He said that Chung Su had already lost all his memories from the very beginning, likely because the experience had been so traumatic that he had buried them himself. As Chung Su learned the principles of flow, Hyo had hoped the turmoil within him would settle, even slightly. However, he acknowledged that the world was not made only of beautiful things. His concern was that if Chung Su were to experience something similar to what he had endured as a child, the buried memories might awaken and torment him once again. The scene then shifted back to the annex. Chung Su, his eyes glowing red, stared at the wealthy man who had killed the children's parents earlier. His sword was already pierced through Hyo Mayan's stomach, and Hyo Mayan trembled in agony while coughing up blood. Hyo Mayan begged him to stop and told him to just kill him already. The rich man, watching the scene, felt intense fear. Chung Su never took his eyes off him, and it felt as though he were facing a wild animal. Chung Su then drove his sword deeper into Hyo Mayan's stomach. Hyo Mayan screamed one final time before his lifeless body collapsed to the ground. Chung Su continued staring at the rich man with those blood-red eyes. Panicking, the rich man insisted that he had nothing to do with the place and claimed he had only come to investigate. Chung Su stepped toward him. The rich man desperately offered money, promising to pay anything and do whatever was asked if he were spared. He even offered an artisan sword, boasting that it was a peerless, legendary blade made by a famous craftsman. Before he could finish speaking, Chung Su swung his sword and cut him down. Lost in his frenzy, Chung Su saw visions of his younger self, swinging a sword while muttering about cutting off heads, planting fear in enemies, killing as many as possible just to live, refusing to die like a dog, and slaughtering others to survive. When he finally regained consciousness, he was drenched in sweat and looked around in shock. He realized that Mugong was carrying him on his back. Mugong asked whether he had come to his senses. Chung Su asked where they were and why he was being carried. Seeing that Chung Su was awake, Muyo waved his hand and informed Mujin. Surprised, Chung Su asked Mugong whether he had been unconscious. Mugong confirmed that he had not woken up for nearly a full day and asked if he felt any better, offering to put him down. Chung Su agreed and asked to be set down. When Mujin approached, he noted that Chung Su was awake. Chung Su apologized for causing so much worry and asked what had happened to him. Mujin, surprised, asked if he truly did not remember anything, including splitting off from the group in Gillen and going to the annex building. Upon hearing the word annex, fragments of memories flashed through Chung Su's mind. A sharp pain shot through his head, and he clenched his teeth while grabbing it. Seeing his condition, Mujin grew nervous and said it would be better for Chung Su to rest longer. For the time being, he planned to focus solely on moving forward for the children's sake. Confused, Chung Su asked what children he meant. Mujin pointed toward a nearby group of children and explained that they were the ones rescued from a slave trader in Gillen. Those who had places to return to had already left, while most of the children who had nowhere to go had stayed behind. Fortunately, the minor Azure sect had agreed to take them in, so the group was traveling together to bring the children there. Chung Su remarked that all of this must have happened while he was unconscious. Mujin lightly tapped him on the shoulder and suggested discussing the earlier events after he had rested more, urging him to focus on recovery for now. Chung Su thanked him. Mujin remained silent as he watched Chung Su move a short distance away. Inwardly, he reflected that there were countless things he wanted to ask Chung Su. The horrific scene he had witnessed at the annex, after Chung Su failed to appear at the meeting place, and the traces of slaughter there were nothing like the Chung Su he thought he knew. Still, he felt that Chung Su needed time alone, and so did he. Now, only the hardest part of the Guangxi province plan remained: recruiting Baek Gowon, the strategist. Baek Gowon was the hidden dragon who guided Du Wulchen, the protagonist of the Unorthodox Tyrant Chronicles, to become the #1 figure among the unorthodox sects and the kingmaker of Nirim. From an outside perspective, Baek Gowon was an intelligence-type overpowered character designed to compensate for Du Wulchen's shortcomings. In the strategic battles against the new heavens to come, his presence was absolutely essential. However, there was a major problem. The Unorthodox Tyrant Chronicles provided almost no information about Baek Gowon during this period, since he was not the protagonist. The only thing that could be inferred was that he was staying with his sick younger sister at the Minor Azure sect. Thus, the final and most critical step of the entire plan was a one-shot, on-the-spot gamble with an unpredictable outcome. Meanwhile, Mu Kyung climbed up a cliff and looked ahead, spotting the buildings of the minor Azure sect in Guangxi province. He returned to the group and informed Mujin that he could see it. Mujin thanked Mu Kyung and told him to come down. Inwardly, he steeled himself, thinking that from this point on, it would begin a battle of wits to recruit the strategist Baek Gowan, one in which he could not see even a single inch ahead. A little later, the group arrived in front of the minor Azure sect's front gate. Mujin knocked on the door and called out, asking if anyone was inside. When no response came, Mujin and the others exchanged confused looks. After a short while, someone opened the door slightly, looking nervous, and asked who they were and what business they had with the minor Azure sect, adding that outsiders were not accepted lightly. Mujin smiled and introduced them as physicians from Sichuan. He explained that they had heard of the minor Azure sect's reputation and had come seeking them. He said they had gathered children from nearby villages who had no homes and asked if they could entrust those children to the sect. The man asked in surprise if they were physicians and had even come to entrust children. He then welcomed them to the minor Azure sect and said the gate would be opened. Mu Kyung whispered to Mujin that this truly seemed to be the only orthodox sect in the unorthodox region. Since arriving in Guangxi, this was the first time he had felt relieved. The man opened the gate fully and urged them to come inside quickly. Mu Kyung and the others guided the children forward, telling them that the sect was welcoming them. As soon as they entered, the gate behind them closed immediately. At that moment, a man stepped forward to greet the group, calling it wonderful news and welcoming them to the minor Azure sect as heroes. He introduced himself as Jin Jikyol, the sect leader. Mujin thanked him for his hospitality and introduced himself as Mujin, the one leading the group. Jin Jikyol said that Hero Mujin had arrived at exactly the right time and explained that the sect had been facing great difficulty lately. Mujin asked what kind of difficulty he meant. Jin Jikyol explained that Guangxi province was unorthodox territory and that, because of this, the minor Azure sect had been given a special mission by the Murim Alliance. Mujin asked what kind of mission it was and whether it was something they were allowed to hear. Jin Jikyol chuckled and said it was nothing grand. Turning toward the children, he explained that their task was simply to gather children in Guangxi and send them to Hunan province. Mujin asked if the Murim Alliance had truly given such an order. Jin Jikyol replied sadly that children who grew up in Guangxi often ended up sold as slaves or becoming members of bandit or raider groups. To prevent that future, the Murim Alliance had decided to take preventive measures. Since the minor Azure sect was the only orthodox sect in Guangxi, all of that responsibility had fallen on them. Mujin then asked what the difficult situation was. Jin Jikyol explained that some time ago, a plague had begun spreading among the children under their protection. Starting about 2 months earlier, the children had developed unexplained high fevers and rashes. All the sect could do was isolate them. In such a remote region, calling for a physician was difficult, so they had no other choice. He shamelessly asked whether the physicians would be willing to take a look at the children. A little later, Mujin and Mugum covered their faces with masks and their hands with gloves as they prepared to enter the isolated buildings. Mujin thought that this had not been mentioned in the unorthodox Tyrant Chronicles. Still, as long as he circulated his inner energy, he should not catch the plague. He knew he would have to face it head-on if he wanted to recruit Baek Gowan, and if his guess was correct, they might even be able to cure it using a particular method. Once ready, Mujin told Mugum that they were going in. Mugum wondered why he had to go in as well. Mujin pushed open the door and stepped inside, immediately smelling an odd stench. He wondered what kind of smell it was. Mugum noticed someone standing in the darkness and quietly pointed it out to Mujin. A child covered in rashes approached them and warned them not to come any further, saying the illness could spread and that no one had recovered from the plague yet. Mugum observed the child and thought that the rashes were exactly as they had heard. He wondered what Mujin was trying to do, since they were not real physicians. The child said that if there was any improvement, he would come inform them and urge them to turn back, warning that it was dangerous. Mugum was about to say something but stopped when he saw Mujin moving toward the child. He called out in alarm, asking what Mujin was doing. The child also looked confused by Mujin's actions. As Mujin drew closer, the child said that Mujin was not from the minor Azure sect. Mujin replied that this was correct and explained that they were physicians from another region who had stopped by the sect to entrust some children. He added that they had heard there were patients there and had come to take a look. Hearing this, the child's eyes widened in shock. He asked whether Mujin had brought children there and suddenly grabbed Mujin's hand, confusing him. The child removed the mask covering his face and urgently told Mujin to listen carefully to what he was about to say. Seeing the skin beneath the mask, Mujin noticed that it was completely free of rashes. The child told Mujin to take the children and leave immediately, warning that the minor Azure sect was not the kind of sect they believed it to be. Meanwhile, elsewhere within the minor Azure sect, Chung Su sat alone with his back against the wall, staring at his hands as if they were soaked in blood. He thought that the memories of that day were hazy, as though covered in fog, but the sticky sensation of murderous intent and rage, compressed into something tangible, still remained in his hands. He let out a sigh and muttered to himself, wondering what this feeling was and how something like it could ever be erased. At that moment, he heard a voice nearby telling someone to come this way. He turned his head to see who it was. He saw Jin Jikyol, the leader of the minor Azure sect, speaking to his disciple and telling him to go along with a certain person. Chung Su immediately recognized them. He noticed the child with the sect leader and thought that the child was one of those they had brought earlier. The disciple then took the child away. Jin Jikyol immediately left the area. Watching this, Chung Su grew uneasy. He wondered why they were taking only that child away without a word and felt that something was wrong. He questioned where they were taking him. Some time earlier, the child had been sitting alone on a set of stairs, lost in thoughts of his mother and father. Jin Jikyol approached him and asked why he was sitting there alone, wondering if something was troubling him. Startled, the child immediately stood up and tried to leave, saying that it was nothing. Jin Jikyol then asked if he wanted to see his parents. The child turned back in confusion, and Jin Jikyol told him that if that was the case, he could help. He offered to take the child to see his parents. After a brief hesitation, the child agreed and told him to lead the way. The scene later shifted to the isolated buildings, where the child covered in rashes spoke to Mujin about the minor Azure sect. Mujin thought in disbelief that the child was not actually sick and questioned why he had been pretending. The child explained that the illness was an act meant to keep the minor Azure sect's people from approaching him. He said it was only a temporary disguise that would eventually be discovered. He revealed that although the minor Azure sect was known to be protecting children under the Murim Alliance's orders, that reputation was false. They spread believable rumors, looted anyone who brought a child there, and eventually sold the children elsewhere. He warned that it was a trap. While he himself had circumstances that prevented him from leaving, it was not too late for Mujin and the others. Mujin reflected that the child had been boldly deceiving adults. If someone that clever had stayed here instead of escaping long ago, then there was no doubt about it. The child had to be Baek Gawan. The circumstances he mentioned must have referred to his younger sister, Baek Garyang, who was sick and unable to move. That confirmed he truly was here. Mujin removed his mask and thanked the child for the warning, saying that they would not run away on their own. He reassured him that they would handle the situation themselves. Elsewhere, a disciple and the child arrived in front of a large wooden gate. The disciple told the child that they had arrived. The child asked if his parents were inside. The disciple replied that they were and said that if the child went inside, he would be able to meet them. He then opened the door and entered the room with the child. The moment the child saw the inside, his eyes widened in shock. The room resembled a slaughterhouse. Realizing what the place truly was, the child froze in horror. With a dark expression, the disciple told him that, just as promised, he would let him meet his parents. Terrified, the child immediately turned around and tried to run. The disciple swiftly grabbed the cloth wrapped around the child's neck, dragged him to a table, and slammed him down. Holding the child's right arm firmly, he picked up an axe and demanded to know where he thought he was going. He mocked the child for wanting to see his parents, complaining that the meat they had stored had gone bad, leaving them unable to eat for 2 months. He asked if the child had any idea how much everyone had been holding back. He said they would send the child to his parents, but only after using him first. Trembling, the child begged to be spared. The disciple raised the axe and remarked that there did not seem to be enough meat, so they would simply have to share it properly. Seeing the raised axe, the child cried out for help. At that moment, the disciple heard a noise from the door and turned toward it in confusion. He saw Chung Su bursting through the door and laughing as he unleashed several sword-sheath slashes toward him. Grinding his teeth in fury, Chung Su continued his assault, but the disciple blocked the slashes with his axe. The disciple mocked Chung Su, saying that he had been given a chance to run away but had wasted it over a mere chunk of meat, calling him soft. Chung Su responded by calling him an animal. He accused him of abandoning basic human decency and using a child as a shield, questioning how they could dare call themselves an orthodox sect while committing such acts. The disciple laughed and called Chung Su's words foolish. He declared that they were not the minor Azure sect at all, but the Mad Demon Bandits, a group that had made a name for itself around Guangzhou. He explained that they had moved their territory to Guangxi province and had been looking for a place to settle. After finding an orthodox sect, they disguised themselves as a merchant guild, claimed they had been attacked by Green Forest bandits, and asked for help. The sect had believed them completely. As repayment, they drugged their food and attacked at night, wiping them out without resistance. Since then, they had been pretending to be the Minor Azure sect for 10 years. He mocked the naivete of the orthodox sect and scoffed at being lectured about righteousness. Chung Su tightened his grip on his sword, his eyes burning red with rage. He declared that they were not worth sparing and were nothing but animals. The disciple pressed the axe against the child's neck and warned Chung Su not to move, saying he might kill the child by accident if startled. Chung Su gritted his teeth in frustration and called him a coward. The disciple replied that animals did not understand cowardice. He added that Chung Su had more important things to worry about than a mere piece of meat, revealing that he had sent Chung Su's companions a little gift, food laced with a generous amount of paralysis poison. The scene shifted to Mu Kyung, who was surprised that the Minor Azure sect had sent them food. The sect members delivering it explained that their sect leader had ordered them to do so and said it was only natural to repay honored guests for their help. They asked him not to refuse their sincerity. Mu Kyung thanked them and asked that their sect leader be thanked on their behalf. After the Minor Azure sect members left, Mu Kyung stared nervously at the food boxes, wondering if everything would truly be fine. The scene shifted back to the slaughterhouse, where a mad demon bandit claimed that he had sent Chung Su's companions a small gift, food loaded with a generous amount of paralysis poison. However, Chung Su kept his focus fixed on the mad demon bandit, who was holding a child hostage. He carefully searched for even the slightest mistake, waiting for a chance to attack and save the child. Noticing Chung Su's lack of reaction, the bandit mocked him, remarking that Chung Su showed no concern and questioning whether he had truly been close to the companions who came with him. Chung Su replied calmly that the reason he was not shaken was because he trusted them. The bandit ground his teeth in frustration and dismissed it as nonsense. Inwardly, he felt growing panic. He realized he was barely holding on thanks to the hostage, and at the moment he let his guard down even slightly, he would be killed for certain. Cold sweat ran down the bandit's face as he met Chung Su's intensely focused, red-tinged eyes. Those eyes stirred something familiar within him. Suddenly, realization struck. He had seen them before. Those beast-like eyes were the same ones he had seen 10 years ago. At the same time, Chung Su was sweating heavily, forcing himself to maintain focus despite a severe headache that refused to subside. He wondered why it had to happen now, of all times. With a trembling hand, the bandit pointed one of his axes toward Chung Su and accused him, saying that he finally remembered his face and asking whether Chung Su had followed them all this way. Chung Su questioned what the bandit was suddenly talking about. The bandit shouted angrily, accusing Chung Su of pretending ignorance. He insisted that he recognized those eyes and declared that Chung Su was from a rural village near Qinghai province, attacked 10 years ago, and that there was no way he could forget them. Upon hearing the name of the village, buried memories from 10 years ago resurfaced in Chung Su's mind. A sharp pain surged through his head as confusion overwhelmed him, and he wondered what was happening and why these memories were returning. The bandit continued shouting, claiming that on that day, Chung Su had slaughtered them like dogs, killing even those who tried to run or begged for mercy. He raged that they had been forced to flee to Shanxi with nothing left. He cursed Chung Su as an insane monster, accusing him of calling them worthless animals and claiming that Chung Su was no different from them, insisting that Chung Su was the one who had turned them into what they were. Overwhelmed by the pain in his head, Chung Su collapsed to his knees, barely able to endure it. This sudden opening confused the bandit at first, but he quickly seized the opportunity. Believing it was his chance, the bandit rushed forward, determined to kill Chung Su immediately. Before the bandit could strike, Mujin arrived and delivered a powerful flying kick. The swift whirlwind sweep smashed into the bandit's chest, sending him crashing violently into the wall. Mujin let out a sigh of relief before turning to Chung Su and asking if he was all right. Chung Su questioned why Mujin had come there. Mujin explained that a child he had met at an isolated building had told him about the place. Hearing that children were being dragged there, Mujin had come to investigate. He then asked how Chung Su had discovered the location. Chung Su explained that he had seen the Minor Azure sect leader taking a child away and felt something was suspicious, so he followed them and found the place. He then warned Mujin that the others might be in danger, explaining what the bandit had said about poisoning the food and planning an attack. Although he was unsure whether it was true, he urged Mujin to confirm it. Mujin acknowledged the warning and said he would head there immediately, but asked once more whether Chung Su was truly all right. Chung Su answered that he was fine and believed he was simply exhausted. Mujin instructed him to look after the child for the time being and to get some rest, saying they would talk later. As Chung Su looked down at his own hands, he reflected that the bloodstains were not something that had merely gotten on him, they were his own doing. Even if he had forgotten, he realized he could never truly erase it. Meanwhile, Mujin arrived at the residence where the group was staying. He destroyed the front gate with an invincible punch and rushed inside. As he scanned the surroundings, he called out for Mu Kyung and Muyul, asking if they were safe. He then froze upon seeing that Muyul and Mu Kyung had already defeated their attackers. Mu Kyung turned toward Mujin nervously and acknowledged his arrival. Mujin wondered what had happened but noted with relief that they did not appear to be seriously injured. Mu Kyung explained that earlier, members of the Minor Azure sect had brought food as a gesture of gratitude. Feeling it would be rude to refuse, they accepted it. Just as they were about to eat, the monkey Lingling suddenly attacked the food and knocked everything over. Lingling had become strangely furious, and while they were panicking, members of the Minor Azure sect burst in angrily. Although Mu Kyung admitted it made sense for them to be upset, since their food was ruined, the group apologized sincerely. Despite that, the sect members still drew their swords. Mujin let out a sigh, realizing the situation. He remarked that Mu Kyung and the others had become quite skilled at subduing people. Mu Kyung replied that he had only knocked them out for the time being. Mujin said that was good and expressed relief that nothing worse had happened. Mu Kyung asked whether they were now in serious trouble. Mujin reassured him, saying he had done well and that those people were dangerous to begin with. Mu Kyung smiled in relief. Mujin cautioned him that next time, he should not resort to fighting without thinking it through. Some time later, after all the mad demon bandits, who had been pretending to be members of the Minor Azure sect, were restrained, Baek Gowon arrived. He commented that Mujin had said he would handle the rest and expressed surprise that everything had been resolved so cleanly in just half a day. Mujin replied that there was still one matter left to resolve. Baek Gowon acknowledged this. Mujin smiled and pointed out that the reason Baek Gowon had been unable to leave the Minor Azure sect remained unresolved. The scene then revealed Baek Gowon's younger sister, Baek Garyong, lying unconscious on a bed. Mujin reflected on Du Wulchen's first companion, the strategist who helped him achieve vengeance for his clan, Baek Gowon. In the story, Baek Gowon had a younger sister who was seriously ill. Her illness originated from a special constitution. She had been born with overwhelmingly powerful, innate yin energy. The extreme cold produced by that yin energy was so intense that it could freeze not only her body, but even the area around her. Meanwhile, Baek Gowon honestly explained to Mujin that when his sister was younger, the condition had not been this severe. At first, her hands and feet had merely been colder than other people's, and she had been more susceptible to the cold. However, as she grew older, her yin energy gradually intensified, and eventually she began struggling to endure the cold on her own. Lately, she had been spending most of her time asleep, likely because simply suppressing the cold within her body had already become too much for her. As he spoke, Baek Gowon gently placed a cloth soaked in warm water on his sister's head. He continued, explaining that they had visited many clinics reputed to be famous. Aside from learning that her condition was a type of blocked meridians disorder, they had found no other answers. All he could do was remain by his sister's side as she grew weaker, and little by little, he had begun to lose hope as well. Still, he believed there was meaning in heaven's will that had brought Mujin and the others there, and he begged them to save his sister. Mujin considered the situation. Just as stomach ailments were treated with medicine and wounds with surgery, problems rooted in inner energy had to be treated with inner energy itself. He instructed Mugung to begin the treatment. Mugung sat beside Baek Garyong, extended his palm toward her, and a green glow formed as his inner energy manifested. Mugung carefully regulated the power of the Rulai divine palm strikes pure, extreme yang energy, injecting it slowly so it circulated through the patient's meridian points throughout her entire body. The heat flowed through her meridians without harming her, merged with her cold energy, neutralized it, and brought balance and harmony. Watching this, Baek Gowon remarked that he had never seen treatment like that before. Mujin explained that it was one of the treatment methods used by the body treatment clinic, known as heat therapy. When Baek Gowon asked about the clinic, Mujin explained that it was a large-scale medical institution established on the Orthodox faction's side a few years earlier. Baek Gowon remarked that the orthodox factions possessed such treatments, and that he had wanted his sister to receive them as well. However, Guangxi province was territory controlled by the unorthodox factions and ruled by the unorthodox alliance. With only the two of them as children, it had been impossible to even leave the province. Mujin reflected on the unorthodox alliance, an alliance of 7 unorthodox factions formed to oppose the orthodox factions. It was the largest unorthodox group of the era and one of the main antagonistic forces in the unorthodox tyrant chronicles. Du Wulchen's path had begun with the annihilation of the Jaegao clan, followed by the defeat of Hyuk Jingang, the leader of the unorthodox alliance, and the discovery of the true power backing him. After that, he had started a war with the New Heavens. Yet even as he fought the unorthodox alliance, Du Wulchen's hands had already been stained with blood. In the end, he became a public enemy of Mirim, and the one who presented him with a solution had been Baek Gowon. In the story, Baek Gowon had warned Du Wulchen that seeking vengeance for his clan at the cost of everything was reckless, no matter how exceptional his martial arts were, especially if he faced the entire unorthodox alliance alone. When Du Wulchen asked what he meant, Baek Gowon advised him to spread the fact that he was the one who annihilated the Jaegao clan and use that infamy as a foundation to build a new force within the unorthodox sections. Du Wulchen objected, saying that was not the right path. Baek Gowon countered that good and evil, justice, and morality no longer mattered. If Du Wulchen truly wanted vengeance, he would have to abandon the orthodox path and walk the unorthodox one. From that point on, he could no longer embrace both. He needed to cast aside a double-edged heart, ignite the will of a single blade, and walk the path of a cunning hero who would not hesitate to use any means necessary, a path befitting a name that carried the word blade. In the present, Mujin reflected that Du Wulchen had ultimately cast aside the sword and taken up the blade, walking the path of the unorthodox sect in earnest. With Baek Gowon at his side, they eventually succeeded in bringing down the unorthodox alliance, but at the very end, his thoughts were interrupted as green energy spread throughout the room. Seeing this, Mujin realized that the injection of extreme yang energy was complete. At that moment, Baek Gyeryong muttered softly and woke up, rubbing her eyes. Still confused, she called out to her brother before she could fully open them. Baek Gowon rushed to her side and embraced her, crying with relief that she had truly woken up. He then turned to Mujin and expressed his deep gratitude, wondering how he could ever repay such kindness. Meanwhile, Baek Gyeryong looked at Mujin with confusion. Mujin reassured Baek Gowon that repayment was unnecessary and asked Baek Gyeryong how she was feeling. She replied in short phrases, saying that she felt weak, that there was still cold energy, but that it was not unbearable. Mujin found her phrasing puzzling. Baek Gowon explained that his sister had a habit of speaking in short phrases because she lacked energy, and that what she meant was that her body, once filled with cold, felt as though it had recovered a little. Mujin understood. Baek Gowon then introduced the group to his sister, explaining that they were healers from Sichuan who had treated her illness and also taken down the minor Azure Sex gang. Baek Gyeryong looked toward Mugung, who smiled back at her. She appeared slightly confused and lost in thought. At that moment, Mujin cautioned them not to relax yet. If the treatment was not continued, her condition could relapse. Her constitution needed to be changed, which meant she would require several more treatments. He explained that they would soon be leaving the Minor Azure sect and asked whether Baek Gowon would come with them for his sister's continued treatment. Baek Gowon immediately agreed, saying that since they had found a way to treat his sister, he would follow them anywhere. He also vowed to repay the kindness they had shown in saving him, his sister, and the other children. Baek Gyeryong then softly mentioned Songzhan Shaolin. Without thinking, Mujin confirmed that they were headed to Shaolin at Songzhan, only for both him and Mugung to freeze in confusion at how she knew this. Baek Gyeryong continued, reciting fragmented phrases about Shaolin's great monks, repaying kindness with devotion, and a narrow escape from death. Mujin asked how she knew they were from Shaolin. She explained calmly that it was nothing surprising. Innate yin energy countered yang energy, and since her illness stemmed from innate yin energy, it required yang inner energy for treatment. However, most martial arts yang energy could not be used for healing. What was required was a martial art that used pure yang energy while allowing precise control, and the only one she knew that met those conditions was Shaolin's Rulai Divine Palm Strike. Mujin was astonished. He realized that she understood everything, from the cause of her illness to its cure. This was Baek Gowon's younger sister, someone he had claimed was even more talented than himself. According to the original story, the unorthodox alliance would covet Baek Gyeryong's constitution and purchase her, and by the time Baek Gowon found her again, it would already be too late. In the end, both Du Woolchin and Baek Gowon would become so broken that they could no longer maintain their sanity, leaving them with nothing but vengeance. Mujin reflected that even if by coincidence, he might have gained something even more valuable than a brilliant strategist like Baek Gowon. Having already interfered with the novel's plot, he resolved not to let this tragedy repeat itself simply because it was fated. Saving as many people as possible might be what he was meant to do there. The scene then shifted to late at night, to one of the buildings where all the mad demon bandits were restrained. Someone approached them with a sword. Upon seeing him, the bandits began to tremble in fear. The one who entered was Chung-Soo, who declared that he had thought it through and reached a conclusion of his own, that those beasts were not worth keeping alive. Chung-Soo recalled the day 10 years ago, when his small, peaceful village near Qinghai was engulfed in flames. The mad demon bandits had stormed in, setting the village on fire and slaughtering its people without mercy. Their leader ordered his subordinates to kill everyone and loot everything, declaring that they should show exactly what kind of bastards the mad demon bandits were. The bandits responded eagerly and carried out his command. At that moment, the leader noticed something unusual and demanded to know what it was. Standing some distance away was a child holding a sword. The leader questioned what a child was doing there. That child was Chung-Soo. Several bandits approached him, laughing cruelly as they mocked him and asked whether he was searching for his parents. They told him to search thoroughly, claiming that if he looked hard enough, he might find a finger or something similar. Chung-Soo immediately dropped into a fighting stance and swung his sword. Before the bandits could even react, he cut them down. In the present, Chung-Soo recalled that scene, how he had killed the mad demon bandits 10 years earlier. He let out a deep sigh as the restrained bandits around him were already lying dead by his hand. At that moment, Mujin arrived and called out to him. With blood-red eyes, Chung-Soo turned to face him. Mujin asked if he was all right. Chung-Soo glanced at the lifeless bodies of the mad demon bandits, and replied that he was fine, explaining that he had simply made them pay for their sins. Mujin responded that he was not trying to defend them, but questioned whether Chung-Soo truly needed to execute them so brutally, remarking that it was unlike him. Chung-Soo clenched his teeth in agitation and asked whether Mujin truly knew him well enough to say that. Mujin, confused, asked him to clarify. Chung-Soo raised his sword and declared that Mujin was mistaken about one thing before swinging it at him. Mujin blocked the attack and demanded to know what he was doing. Chung-Soo declared that this was his true nature and released his sword chi. Mujin blocked the energy as well, then immediately reached out, grabbed Chung-Soo by the collar, and slammed him to the floor. Mujin told him that it was the same as before, recalling how Chung-Soo had deliberately tried to provoke him in the past. He explained that he had realized then that Chung-Soo always acted that way when he wanted something. Mujin stated that Chung-Soo had clearly been troubled for days and assured him that he would listen, urging him to explain what had been bothering him. Chung-Soo remained silent for a moment before revealing that those men had been a band of mountain bandits known as the Mad Demon Bandits, the same ones who had raided his village when he was a child. He explained that his village had been small and peaceful, but that peace had not lasted. He vividly remembered the screams of people begging for their lives and the laughter of the bandits, as they mocked and killed them. In the midst of that chaos, he had been frozen in helplessness, feeling nothing except the desire to live. He had picked up a sword from the ground and begun killing anyone who approached him. Later, when he looked back on it, he realized that he had not been swinging his sword merely to survive, he had been swinging it to kill. By sheer luck, he had later been found and taken in by the Taoists. However, being weak, he had fled from those memories, hiding his true nature and the beast within him. He had believed that was the only way he would be accepted, and he confessed that he had been deceiving the Taoists all along. Hearing this, Mujin understood that encountering those men again had caused Chung-Soo's suppressed memories to resurface, shaking the very foundation of the principles he had learned in Wudong. Mujin released him and stood up, addressing him as Taoist Chung-Soo. He explained that, in the end, Chung-Soo had done what he did to survive and asked whether he truly blamed himself for it. With a sigh, Mujin admitted that he did not believe Chung-Soo's actions had been entirely wrong. Considering what those men had done, Mujin believed they were people who deserved to die. If Chung-Soo had not killed them back then, not only would he have died, but many more people, and children, would have suffered afterward. Mujin pointed out that Jianghu was filled with villains, and in such a world, it was impossible to avoid staining one's hands with blood. Even Shaolin had individuals specifically tasked with dealing with people like them. Chung Su responded that even if his actions had been for survival, he could not deny that he had tried to kill as many as possible. He admitted that he feared the beast inside him might be his true nature. He was afraid that the person he was now, along with Wudong's teachings, would be erased, leaving only the beast behind until he became a monster like them. Mujin lightly tapped him on the shoulder, understanding that Chung Su was afraid of losing himself. He told Chung Su that while he understood his fear, he could not look away from it. The memories and killing intent from his past were also part of him, just as the restraint, discipline, and goodness he had cultivated in Wudong were part of him as well. Mujin urged him not to cast aside any part of himself, but to embrace even his past as part of Wudong's principles, just as the Taoists had accepted him for the sake of his future, without any ulterior motives. He told Chung Su that he, too, had to accept himself for the future of the child who had taken up the sword due to a tragic accident. Chung Su expressed his gratitude for Mujin's guidance. The scene then shifted to the largest green forest stronghold in Guangxi, the Great Tiger Stronghold, which was engulfed in flames. Its leader lay wounded on the ground, having been injured by the Wolf King's subordinates. The Wolf King questioned whether the information was true, asking if those enemies had been targeting the North Wind escort establishment from the very beginning. The Tiger Stronghold leader confirmed that it was true. When the Wolf King asked where they had gone, the wounded leader claimed to know and begged for his life. Before he could finish speaking, the Wolf King gestured to his subordinate, who immediately drove a sword through the Tiger Stronghold leader. The man screamed in pain before dying. The Wolf King then ordered his subordinates to release the wolves into Gilan, declaring that they would flush their enemies out and hunt them down. Genius protagonists, overwhelming growth, and legendary battles, this is your battlefield. We're just steps away from 20,000 subscribers. Subscribe now and rise with us.